Hello there! Next, we'll be making an intensity change scale. We'll be using the paper that already has your monochromatic and your grayscale in tempera. When a color is taken directly from the container, it is at its most intense. So these colors on the very outside edge, the three primaries, red, yellow, and blue, those are at their most intense. Once you change a color a little bit, you do subdue it. When a color is subdued, it is slightly less intense. Now, there are many ways to subdue a color. One of them is to add black, and you make shades. Another way is to add white, and you make tints. Another way is to add grays, and you'll make tones. This is how you can make a color less intense than how it is when you first mix it or when you get it from the container. It's easy to understand why the paint color black would make all of the other colors darker. That makes sense. But what we're going to learn today is there are other ways to create darks for the colors that you want to use. In changing the intensity of a color, we have to use two colors at their maximum intensity, so full strength from the container the way they arrive. And then we're going to mix a gray. Now, the gray we're using here is a mixture of these two colors, so it will not be your traditional gray. It will be a gray, but not neutral gray. Neutral gray is the one that's made of black and white, just so you know. When you, quote, gray out a color, that means you are subduing its intensity. Now, intensity change scales are done with complementary colors. Complementary colors are two which are across from each other on the color wheel, directly across, not kind of across, but directly. Why is this? For example, yellow is the complement of violet. Violet is red and blue. Yellow is not red and blue. In other words, if I have yellow and I have violet, I basically have all three primary colors because violet is made of red and blue. That is why we say complement, because together they make a whole. This is complement with an E in the middle, not an I, not like I love your dress or those are really cool shoes. This is complementary, which means together they create a whole. Another example, blue is directly across from orange. Orange is made of red and yellow, which happens to be everything blue is not. Put them together and you will create a less intense version of each color. Now, it seems to make a lot of sense that blue would make orange dark, but what's weird is orange will actually make blue dark, because remember, orange is everything blue is not. So, violet makes yellow darker. That makes sense, but what I'm also telling you is that yellow will make violet darker. This is a more natural way to get to darker versions of color than mixing straight black. You always have the option of mixing black, but depending on what area of a still life or what color you're trying to get, it may be more beneficial to try changing the intensity by using a complementary color. So for example, if I'm trying to get a bunch of shades of green, I could definitely mix a green or get a green and then add black. But I can also get darker greens by adding red, which seems weird, but we're going to do that next. I have chosen red and green to use as my spectrum intensity colors, so these will be at the opposite ends of the scale. You start with one of them and you're going to use it full strength the way it comes. Now I'm using red and green, but you could easily use blue and orange, yellow and violet, or any of the other ones too. They're just a little trickier because it might require a mixing. Like for example, yellow-green is directly across from red-violet. Since we don't have those two colors already made, you'd have to mix them. In the interest of keeping it somewhat simple, I suggest you use two colors that we already have. There's green at its maximum intensity. Next will be red. And you're going to lay that in all the way across. Full strength, the way it comes. Try your best to stay in the lines. Don't be like me. I just blopped it in there. All right. The next thing is that gray. Now, you might think, why don't we just work our way across? It'll take a lot of paint if we do that. So instead, we're gonna make the medium gray. You may remember that making the middle was what we did when we made our grayscale. And it's a good idea to do that when you're making a scale. That way you know if you've gone too far, too quickly. Okay, so I'm gonna take a bunch of that green, take a bunch of the red next. And what I'm going for here is a color that does not look like either of the two it came from, okay? So when this little baby doesn't look like either of its parents, that's when you know you've got the right color. With red and green, you're gonna get a pretty dark thing. Not black, but it's very dark. With orange and blue, for example, you're gonna get something that looks like a very dark brown, okay? This feels like a very, very dark green. So since I can call it that, that means it is not quite a gray. So I want to put a little more red in it and see if I can really get it to feel not green and not red. There we go. Get a little something. There you go. All right, so you paint that in. And again, it's not neutral gray, it's a gray. Gray is a term, it's also a color, right? Just like orange is a fruit and also a color. So lazy. Are you telling me that orange didn't exist before someone took a bite of one? I find that hard to believe. Either way, you're gonna take these three colors, place them in just like that. The next step is to mix the 3 steps between green and gray, and then to mix the next steps between red and gray. These 3 here, these 3 here. Now, when finished, it's going to look like red is transforming into green or green is transforming into red, even though that's technically not what's going to happen. We're going to get all the tones first because sometimes it's tricky. Remember, you might be going for this one, but you get this one. Get them all first on the palette, then decide where they go. It's much easier that way, to be honest. Okay, so I'm going to take a little red, move it over here. There's that, okay? And now I'm gonna add a tiny bit of green. Tiny, tiny bit, very edge there, right? Okay, tiny bit of green and add it to that red. If I do not see a change, well, then I will go back to my green. But if you can see, it is already getting darker. Now it's a lot more easy to control when you are mixing complements than if you are mixing black. Black changes the puddle very quickly. Too much of the complementary color will change it too. We're gonna go a tiny bit more green. Put that in there. All right. Now I think I've got something that definitely feels like it is a little darker of, oh boy. Whoops, that was the rest of the black in my brush. Did it go too far? I'm going to leave it because I like it and I'm not going to paint them in yet. Just like the advice I gave you. I'm going to get the next 2, then I'll paint them in. All right, I've got the 3 colors I was looking for. I didn't get to them in the correct order, but I'm definitely going to paint them in the correct order. So the first one will be this one, just kind of the lightest one, I guess. It's mostly red. And then the next one will be this one here. It's getting a little darker. And then this third one. There's with the first step towards green. There's with the next step towards green filled in. And with that third red filled in. And if it was too dark, I'd know it was too dark because it might be darker than the gray and the middle. Then I would have to figure something out and go backward. Next, I'm going to be working from green towards the middle, or from color B. Color A, color B. From color B to the middle. You may have chosen different colors for your example. I've got 3 little puddles of green over here, which I will add a bit of red to each, progressively getting darker, more gray, less intense, more subdued. And now I've got the 3 greens mixed that I want to lay in here. I've got the first step, it's the lightest green, then one that gets a little darker with a speck more red, and then the third one, which is a darker green, but is still not as dark as my gray. With the first green laid in, here's with the second green laid in, and with the third green laid in. As you can see, even though I didn't really transform red into green or green into red, it kind of feels that way. Again, use this as a learning tool. You have figured out another way to make colors darker without using black. Again, how do you do it? Use the complement. Any two colors across from each other on your color wheel are complements. So if I want to make an orange, like the actual fruit orange, if I want to make an orange a little bit darker for shading, I could add blue. If I was painting a banana, I could even add violet to make it a little bit darker. If I were painting purple grapes, which is violet plus a little bit of black mixed in, you could darken your violet with yellow. Seems crazy. Try it. Intensity change.